We are recording. Hello, Dr. Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And again, thank you so much for coming back on the show. To be honest with you, I was going to change the name of the show after your interview. I was going to change it to the Metaphysical Moron because of all the technical difficulties that we had. It was a bit of a cluster. That was to say, we had so much audio technical issues, and but that being said, I know we're going to have another powerful show, a lot of information, a lot of truth, guys. So pay attention. This is going to be some really stuff that a lot of information that is not out there. And I know you have no problem, providing truth and getting some amazing information, which we're going to talk about. So where do you want to start with first? Because I know we had three basic topics we wanted to cover, and I thought we're going to talk about the three C words, not those C words you're thinking of, but we're going to talk about, maybe cancer. We may throw in some vitamin C ideas. We may talk about COVID too as well. So where do you want to start?
Yeah, so let's start with what vitamin C is.
Yes,
So,
perfect. Let's do that.
so vitamin C is a really potent antioxidant. And the reason why we love vitamin C so much and vitamin C is so important is because the human body does not synthesize or produce vitamin C, whereas some mammals and animals actually can make vitamin C. We can't make vitamin C. So this is where in our environment, it's so important that we know what food sources provide us with vitamin C, and that every day we're making sure that we get enough vitamin C in our body. So that's just, I think, where we need to
I think that's a good
start.
idea. Yeah, I think that's good. We'll start basic and then we'll build up. Because I know there's a lot of misinformation about vitamin C. I've had another naturopathic doctor on, and she produces her own supplement line. And once I found out all the craziness behind vitamin C, it kind of just blew my mind, and I really got upset about it. And it just made me really think, like, I mean, this needs to be revisited again, just to help people understand what the importance of vitamin C is, but also at the same time all the different types of vitamin C, what's all good, what's not good, and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So were you guys just speaking about the different forms of vitamin C?
She talked a little bit about that. She talked more from a manufacturer's standpoint. We kind of looked at, vitamin C in general, some of the natural forms of it. We talked about precursors a little bit, a lot of the synthetic versus natural. That's where she kind of talked, because she does all natural stuff versus a lot of the synthetic stuff out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the source of the vitamin C is obviously extremely important, because when we utilize, and the vitamin C that I want to talk about more about today is more in the intravenous realm. And
Okay,
so the
perfect.
intravenous realm, they are producing or extracting vitamin C from a source. So a lot of the vitamin C supplements that you get in the regular stores, like, your big box stores, where most people unfortunately purchase their supplements from, they are getting their vitamin C. Michael's just pointing to himself.
Yeah.
Um, they are getting their vitamin C source from corn. And we know that corn is one of the most highly genetically modified crops that exists. And the problem with genetic modification, and I know probably some of your listeners might have an idea or understanding of what genetic modification means, and some may not, but the problem with genetic modification is that they're actually changing the way the DNA works in the plant. And this changes the way that our body responds to it, because our body is supposed to respond to natural existing plants. And when you start playing around with the DNA, well, now our bodies won't recognize it as being the same substance, and then our immune system is going to start reacting in a negative way to that food or from the source where we're trying to extract the vitamin C from. So even intravenously, the source that we use in our IVs is tapioca source. So it's a cleaner source. It is less immune reactive than the GMO crop of the corn. So we don't like to use anything that is derived from corn. Again, we are having to use it as a derivative, as it is being compounded to put in an IV, whereas I'm sure the other ND that you had on your show, she was using a source from plants or well, it would be all plants, but from fruit or vegetable sources to extract the vitamin C. So she was giving the whole form of it, probably, as opposed to just the single ingredient being the vitamin C. So the source is very, very important. And so not all IVs are made the same. Not all people who administer IVs are utilizing the same grade of product or the same quality of product. So it's always important to inquire and find out what is the source of vitamin C that they're using before they inject you with anything. And I just want to say, as a blanket statement, before you put anything in your body, whether it's oral, whether it's by injection, even if it's just topical, we need to be more inquisitive as a critical thinker. We need to be more inquisitive to find out what are the ingredients, because ingredients can cause harm. And even if you think that, oh, well, maybe I'm not going to elicit a response like an allergic reaction instantaneously to the substance, you have to think in terms of toxicity. Little by little, our body, if it's exposed to toxic ingredients, then over time, long time periods, that we can develop symptoms of dis-ease in the body, like cancer, for example.
Yeah. And that's so true. Like I'm learning more and more. And that's one of the things I loved about this podcast, because I have people like yourself on and other doctors too. And as I'm learning, it just baffles me at the same time. It saddens me at the same time. It gets me a little angry, because I kind of like, I can't believe that. And it's like, really? Like, the toxicity levels, and why would, there's got to be some fundamentally, why are they putting these type of products on the shelf? Why are we being complicit in that too, as well as consumers? Why do we have to say, why do we want this? I think we just get so used to having things cheaply made. We kind of get into that mode, like, I can't spend that much money on that. I can't spend that much money on that. And, I think that's a little bit of a problem, I think, as far as overall healthcare in Canada. And again, this is my opinion. If we had to pay for medical treatment here in Canada, I think more people would spend more money on preventative measures first, because they realize they can't afford to be sick, instead of having, that kind of crutch, because, oh, I don't have to worry about it. And I think we kind of get that mentality a little bit too, as well. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
I want to share this message with people every single day because I think that people have this misconceived notion that our healthcare system here in Ontario is so amazing because it's considered to be free. And the saying that there's no such thing as a free lunch really applies here, because our healthcare system is only beneficial to a certain extent, and it's only beneficial in regards to emergency medicine. Outside of that, our chronic care, it does not provide people with any type of benefit. If anything, it's actually to their detriment. And the reason why I'm stating this is because if we look at the stats, statistically speaking, and this is data more out of the US, but it applies here to us in Canada as well, the number 3 cause of death is something called iatrogenic death. Iatrogenic death is induced by improper or proper use of medication from doctors. So whether it's surgery, surgical procedures, or whether it's prescribing certain medications. And I mean, I'll just lead with this, is that even when I think about my cancer patients, a lot of them who pass, they didn't pass from their cancer. They passed from side effects of treatments that conventional doctors were providing the patients with. So I had one patient who was on a very high dose blood thinner that led to a brain bleed, and then he passed from that. I had another patient who received too much radiation and chemotherapy, and he ended up dying from his congestive heart failure. So the problem that we have is that we are blindly using these medications. And the reason why I say blindly is because most medical doctors are not adequately trained in the pharmaceutical drugs. They don't really know the pharmaceutical drugs very well. And if you speak to anyone who's a pharmaceutical sales rep, you'll learn very quickly that they love their job and that it's just very easy and it's very financially lucrative. And the reason why they love their job is because they only have to come in with a 1-page monograph of the pharmaceutical drug. And by monograph, it looks at risk, side effects, mechanism of action. So if I'm the doctor and I'm being pursued by the pharmaceutical sales rep and they're coming into my office with a free lunch, haha, no pun intended, and they're showing me the monograph about this great new drug, right? Well, that's all I'm going to utilize. So I just spoke to a friend today, and she was misdiagnosed with a condition, and they were prescribing her antibiotics for something that she didn't even have a fever for. And really, why are you prescribing antibiotics to anyone when you are not certain that it is a bacterial infection? And she has a huge full body rash from her antibiotics. I just spoke to her like minutes before we started this podcast. So this is the big problem, is that the general public trusts, just like you said, you're like, why are these products going on the shelf? It's because the general public blindly trusts big pharma. They blindly trust the government, and people are taking the onus of responsibility, and they're saying, I don't want to be responsible. I want someone else to be responsible for me, because I'm a child and I don't know how to read, and I don't know how to spend time doing things because I'm too busy watching my Netflix series show. I'm too busy eating my toxic McDonald's. I'm too busy engaging in toxic relationships that I don't have time to be educated. So that's what the general public wants. They want to be told what to do, and they want to have that trust, that fake trust. It's not real trust, everybody. So they want to trust in somebody else telling them what to do, and they want to put the blindfold on and close their ears and close their mouth and not be involved. And that's the problem. The onus is on every single one of us as an individual to find out what you are putting in your body, putting on your body, or injecting into your body. The onus is on you to find out, is that safe for me, yes or no? And I realize that, you know, it's maybe difficult to source out that information, but that's where you would go and seek out people, maybe like myself, to inquire further. And then there's, obviously, we live in the world of the internet, and you can Google a million things. And I don't even like to use the term Google, because Google is heavily censored. So what I prefer is DuckDuckGo. It's just that we have the colloquial terminology instilled in our mind that is how we phrase it. So I would be on DuckDuckGo, or I would use an uncensored platform to try to find information, because you have to realize Instagram, Facebook, Google, they are censoring all of this very important data for people to educate themselves. And the other problem, sorry, and I'm going on a rant here, the other problem is that people watch media and they think the media is telling them the truth.
Yeah.
And the thing that boggles my mind, Michael, is that guess who owns every stream of media? TV, newspaper, magazine. There's 6 major companies that own every single media outlet. So again, if you're getting your information from there and you think that that's accurate information, my friend, you are sadly mistaken. As well as, even if we look at scientific studies, the thing that people don't understand how to read is that who is funding the scientific study? Because if I am the big pharma and I'm spending millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to do this study, I'm not spending money just for fun. I'm spending money because I want that study to show me the results I want to show, so the FDA will approve my drug so I can profit and pay out my shareholders. That's the whole point of the game.
Yeah.
But people are choosing to be ignorant, and that's the issue we have.
Yeah.
That's
so true. Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt you, because I love the information there. It's so powerful. And I love that you're so passionate about it. And I think this is what's going to transfer across in the podcast, because I think people need to kind of have a little bit of a wake up call, just say, hey, wake up just for a second. And I think people are. It's a little bit slow. You know, we're a little bit slow to get there, but you can kind of see it. It's slowly getting to that point where people are starting to realize that, about the media, about taking ownership of their own responsibility of their lifestyle and things like that, which is so important. And it's amazing. You start to see in other forms of media too, they're talking about these problems with toxicity in the body, the sources of vitamins that we're using, things like that, the increased rates of infertility, toxicity, disease in general. So are you finding a lot of the correlations just because of just poor diets, poor things like that? There's just more increases of cancer? Because you work with cancer patients all the time. And what are the main things that are causing that you're finding are the root causes of the increase in cancer?
Yeah. So I just want to add as well to my previous rant, like even people like yourself doing podcasts. So people who are not being paid by big media or big pharma, try to educate yourself through these channels, because this is people trying to share from the goodness out of their heart. Really, that's what this is about. This isn't about getting a paycheck to persuade people to think a certain way. So why are we seeing increased rates of cancer? I think we spoke about this on the last one, but cancer rates have increased tremendously, and they're going to continue to increase, along with an amount of numerous other diseases. And the reason why is because, again, back to people not choosing to be responsible, is that we think that we are so evolved. Everybody thinks, oh, this is the fourth industrial revolution. We are just on our way to being the most advanced society the world has ever seen. And again, we are actually causing harm to ourselves by adding more EMFs into our environment. We are causing harm by adding more chemicals and more plastics and more production to our environment. We are causing harm from our GMO food. And Bill Gates just bought up 80 to 90% of the crops in America. And he is a huge shareholder in Monsanto, which produces solely GMO seed. And this is what's scary, is that even in the summer, and I don't remember if I said this on the previous podcast, but even in the summer, I did a hair mineral analysis, and one of my toxic heavy metals, I shared this already. Do you mind if I share it again?
No, please do. Yeah, please do. Yes.
So one of my toxic heavy metals, so toxic heavy metals, for everyone listening, there are minerals which are healthy for us, and then there's toxic heavy metals. Commonly known are ones like mercury and lead, but there's a lot of other interesting ones that can cause harm in our body as well. And so when I did my hair mineral analysis, one of the heavy metals that I was high in was something called thallium, and I couldn't for the life of me place where my exposure was coming from. So I called the lab, and they're from the south, and had a nice conversation with one of the doctors that works for the lab there. And I was asking him, like, are you seeing this on people's reports? Like, where do you think my exposure is coming from? Because I can't place it. And he asked me, are you eating a lot of vegetables? And I said, of course I'm eating a lot of vegetables. I'm a naturopathic doctor. And he said, I have really bad news for you. They're irrigating the crops with fracking water in California that is very high in the toxic heavy metal thallium. And I was like, oh my goodness, great. This is another disaster. And this point that I want to point to is that the beauty of, because, there's always a good side and bad side to everything. The good side to Bill Gates buying up all the farmland, and the good side to me finding out that they were irrigating the land in California. So even if I was buying organic, it wouldn't matter. I'm still getting exposed to this heavy toxic metal. Is that now I'm thinking, okay, how can I start producing my own food, or looking at where I can source out my food locally that I know is made by farmers who have a lot of integrity in their product. So I've been to a few farms recently, connected with a few farmers to start educating myself and start learning from that perspective. And in a perfect world, Michael, I'd be having my own greenhouse and growing all my own stuff with heirloom seeds that have not been touched by our biotechnology scientists. That's what I would like to do. So my point is that cancer rates have increased because of our increase in consumption of electronics, the increase in EMFs in our field, the increase of chemical toxicity, the increase of GMO food, the increase in the synthetic food. I don't know if you've seen this, but they're actually starting to synthesize meat. So they're actually going to start making meat in a lab.
That baffles. Just
and
baffles.
The FDA passed legislation March 2020 to state that manufacturers no longer need to disclose fully the ingredients in their food. And this was due to the potential lockdowns that they may encounter. So they might have shortages in some of their ingredients that they might require. So the FDA was like, no problem. You don't have to tell the general public what's in there. And then they wrote temporarily/permanently in this legislation. So we're not being told the truth. And that's why I'm saying I get it. Sometimes it's hard for people because even if they try to do their due diligence, you're not always being fed the information. Even if you read the ingredient label, it's not always being, they're not always being transparent because they don't have to be.
Yeah. It's almost like they're fighting with one arm behind their back. That's what it really seems about. It's so interesting, all the advancements in technology and all that sort of thing, and the industrial revolution. And we talked about, how the chemicals and the amount of chemicals. I think I had just another doctor on, and she was very, very knowledgeable on multiple chemical syndromes and stuff like that. And she talked about how, we're the most toxic humans in history, the amount of stuff in there. And it's really interesting because it's starting to get out there too, because even mainstream with the Podfather, Joe Rogan had a doctor on too, and she talked about the levels of plastic in the body, and she's been doing a lot of research in that. So it's slowly getting out there, and people are really starting to wake up going, okay, we got to stop this. I mean, I know climate change is a big thing, but I think we got to get the toxins and everything else out of the system, and try to figure out other ways to produce stuff versus all these heavy metals, toxic plastic stuff that's going on. And then we're just ingesting it that. And they were just saying that the BPA levels, like if you had to do like a tox screen on yourself again, like the amount of plastics in our body is just, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, climate change, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, but I'll just say this is that, they try to make it about this carbon issue. Newsflash for everybody: the more carbon we have in our environment, the more the plants soak it up and produce oxygen. So carbon's not an issue. What is an issue, and that's why this whole carbon tax, it's all malarkey, it's all BS. Okay, so this is just another way that, it's all about the money, it's all about the dollars. And at the end of the day, what is harming our environment though is when we're using all these chemicals, and when we start GMOing our crops, and we start GMOing. A long time ago, they even did genetically modified salmon, and they tried to keep the salmon in a part that had netting. But again, salmon can jump. So then other GMO salmon started leaving the nets and going into the wild. And, this is just, it's quite scary what can happen with this knowledge in terms of altering genetics and altering DNA.
Yeah. And that's, it is like, like sometimes, like, again, I try to stay mostly positive. I try to stay in my heart and try to just kind of just put the, inspiration out there and just try to stay 100%. But sometimes, like you said, it's almost like we're fighting an uphill battle sometimes. But I think, in general, by having information out there, people are starting to wake up a little bit more. And I don't mean woke, I mean awake. There's a big difference there. And I think people are starting to get information. They're starting to realize, okay, yeah, there is some problems. What can I do? How can I take personal responsibility for myself, my health, my family's health, the environment? How can I make better choices? So I know we wanted to talk a little bit about COVID. I know this is kind of like a little bit of segue into it too as well. And it's really interesting, because from my understanding, COVID is basically a SARS, part of the SARS family. Is that correct? Am I correct in that assumption?
So this gets into another big debate. So technically, they have not isolated or purified this virus, so therefore they can't really say exactly what it is. It's mainly just speculation at this point. So that's really where we have to look to say, okay, well, why are people really getting sick? What's really going on here? And so the vitamin C therapy that they were using in Wuhan, so they did a small little trial where they had 50 patients, and Dr. Anderson, one of our gurus of IV therapy, and he teaches rather internationally, and has even written some papers for hospitals and how to utilize high dose intravenous vitamin C for COVID in hospital. And so his research that he's utilizing for this, one of it was a pre-publicated paper that came out of Wuhan, and they were treating 50 patients who were moderate to severe with COVID, and severe meaning they were on a ventilator. And most people, once they are on a ventilator, either the outcome is going to be that they could potentially die from the use of the ventilator, or that they would have long-term side effects from the use of the ventilator. And so all 50 of these patients, they received high dose intravenous vitamin C every day for 1 week, and all of them actually were able to be discharged from the hospital, and they were considered to be recovered. So again, high dose intravenous vitamin C, the reason why this is such powerful medicine is because we're actually able to utilize this in so many different ways. We use it in our cancer patients, where it has been found to kill cancer cells but maintain the health of healthy cells. We use it in cancer therapy when patients are utilizing it when patients are receiving chemotherapy or radiation. This can be used as an adjunctive therapy, so it can be used as alongside these other therapies. And what that does in the literature and the research has shown that it actually improves the efficacy of the chemotherapy and the radiation and decreases the side effects of the chemotherapy and radiation. And like I stated before, those side effects can be deadly, and even some of the side effects will even state that chemotherapy radiation causes cancer, right? So it's like you're putting these toxins in your body and putting yourself at risk for cancer reoccurrence or potentially even death. So if you can minimize those side effects and improve the efficacy, this is something that's very, very important. And even on my Instagram page, I was interviewing a medical doctor. His name's Dr. Khan, and he actually discovered high-dose intravenous vitamin C, and he admitted that prior to discovering high-dose intravenous vitamin C, he was very opposed to natural therapies, and now he's totally changed his whole practice and really focuses on alternative medicine for his patients because he sees the benefits. And the one thing that he always emphasizes is the safety profile. He's like, well, if you look at the safety profile, the pharmaceutical drugs, they always have side effects, right? There's always a toxicity level. Whereas in the natural therapies, for the most part, they're very, very safe if utilized appropriately. And I'll just get into what's appropriate use for high-dose intravenous vitamin C is that we have to do blood work to see if people are candidates. So not everyone is a candidate for high-dose intravenous vitamin C, but if you are properly evaluated via blood work and determined to be a candidate, then this can be a very safe therapy for you. And so his practice is more in the cancer realm. So the outcomes for the patients in Wuhan were very promising for high-dose intravenous vitamin C. And then from that literature, there was an outside-the-box ER doctor in New York when New York got hit really hard. And this New York doctor, he didn't really understand the data, so he wasn't actually utilizing high-dose intravenous vitamin C. He was using low-dose vitamin C. But regardless, he stated that his patients that received the vitamin C IV therapy did far better than the ones who did not receive those therapies. So that is very, very promising data as well, that we're seeing, okay, there are some doctors that are starting to think outside the box. And the reason why, too, this doctor was probably a little bit more open to utilizing high-dose intravenous vitamin C is because in some research they have done, in one case, they did a randomized double-blind controlled trial, and they took 28 critically ill patients who had septic shock, and they gave them 25 grams of vitamin C, no, 25 milligrams of vitamin C per kilogram every 6 hours for 72 hours. And they did far better and had a better survival rate than the patients that didn't. So again, ethics get into these problems too, because if you know that this is beneficial, why would you withhold that from another patient? But again, in the realm of conventional medicine, they're always looking for, they want the research. And I just want to comment a little bit about the problem with research and data. And I want to use the example of weight loss as being the most basic to understand. If we were to sit here and say, Michael, okay, you know what, you came up with a workout or a food or a supplement or treating your water a special way that you thought this is what's going to, or meditation, and you're like, that's the key, that's what's going to cause weight loss, right? But if we know that the patients are involved in toxic relationships, they're working far too long hours, their stress levels are high, very high. Let's just say if we weren't talking about the diet thing, that we were just talking about some type of natural medicine, and the patient was eating fast food that was toxic or lots of GMO food, right? These are going to interfere. So you can't ever say that one single pill or one single treatment is effective, because that study is actually meaningless when you think about it from a logical standpoint, because there's so many other factors involved in our day-to-day life as a human that either are harming us or are helping us from. And I know that you're very into the energetics, so like energetically, if you're carrying a lot of toxic energy with you, that's going to manifest into disease.
Always does. It always does. And that, I'm a firm believer, and that's just part of my whole practice. It usually starts in the energetic and then moves its way into the physical, down the layers of the body. And it's really interesting about how you talked about the vitamin C therapy. And it makes so much sense. Like, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I mean, I do have a background in health a bit. I'm not the most highly educated person, but it just makes sense. I mean, something natural, something that, improves the overall health and stuff like that. But what excludes people? I know you said you had to do blood work, but what excludes somebody from getting the vitamin C therapy?
So there's something called G6PD. It stands for glucose 6-phosphatase, and it is part of your cycle to produce an energy molecule, ATP. So going back to high school
Physiology, yeah.
chemistry. Yeah. So biology, chemistry. Oh my gosh, I don't know what topic. Okay. So anyways, so if you have a deficiency, everybody has something called genetic mutation, and they're called a single nucleotide polymorphism. All of us have something. You get one set of DNA from your mom, one set of DNA from your dad. That's why you get a double helix structure for your DNA. And so depending on what you inherit, those enzymes will either work at like 100%, 50%, not work very well. And so if you have this glucose 6-phosphatase deficiency, which we're testing for, then we can't give you high dose intravenous vitamin C because it could cause something called hemolysis, which means that your red blood cells would actually burst. They would actually cause them to burst, and that would cause damage in the body. So that's why we always want to make sure, okay, do you have this deficiency, yes or no? I've only had a couple patients that I've not been able to give the vitamin C to. It hasn't been a lot, but again, we always want to err on the side of caution. And I know that some hospitals actually have access to a rapid G6PD test so that they can get the data faster, because we usually wait approximately a week to get the results back from the lab. But if you were in dire need of high dose intravenous vitamin C, they can do it in several hours time if they have access to that test. But other things that we look at are electrolyte balance in the body, kidney function, and liver function. And again, it's not to say that it's an absolute no, but we're just being really mindful. So for example, if my patients have really decreased kidney function, so I have some with severely decreased kidney function, moderately decreased kidney function, we just want to be mindful, because high dose intravenous vitamin C IV is actually dehydrating. It's not hydrating. Everybody thinks that they get an IV, it's hydrating. That's not the case. It's dehydrating. And again, it's just putting more pressure on the kidneys and the body to maintain proper osmotic balance. So we just want to look at that to say, do we need to slow the drip rate down? Maybe we need to dilute it more. Like, just always erring on the side of caution and making sure that we are doing the best we can to prevent any adverse events or reactions for the patient.
Yeah, and again, that's really important. Now, also I've heard these things about where, with intravenous therapy, they talk about cocktailing, where they have, it's like a mixture of stuff. So take vitamin C, and they add glutathione, and they add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they kind of get like a special party mix, and they kind of just like put it in the body, and because it has all the benefits of that. And again, it's intravenous. It does that. Have you had any experience with that, where other doctors or other naturopathic doctors kind of do this type sort of cocktailing? Again, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, so we do a lot of multi-nutrient IVs here as well, and especially utilizing
What's the proper term?
Well, you can call it a multi-nutrient IV.
Okay.
You can call it a Myers cocktail. That's where probably we're getting the word cocktail from. So one of the formulas was invented by an individual named Myers, so they called it Myers cocktail. And so you can really customize the IV very specifically to the patient. So high dose intravenous vitamin C, you don't really mix it with anything else, like, because
Okay.
it is actually a pro-oxidative treatment, meaning like it will go and remove cells that don't belong in the body, whether it's a viral cell, whether it's a bacterial cell, a parasite, fungal, yeast, cancer. Okay, so high dose intravenous vitamin C, we have to do that on its own. We can't mix it with anything else. Lower doses of vitamin C are around 5,000 to 10,000 milligrams that we would administer, and we would mix it with B vitamins, so all your B vitamins, all of your minerals. We would add some amino acids, which are to build protein in the body, and then we would add some antioxidants, and glutathione being the most favorable antioxidants. And we love using glutathione because glutathione is so imperative to our health. And when we look at any disease condition, it's always due to a lack thereof of glutathione. So the reason for that is that your body is actually manufacturing glutathione. So your body is a manufacturing plant, and we don't consume food with glutathione in it. It has to make glutathione. And again, back to me talking about the genetic mutations, if you have a lot of single nucleotide polymorphisms in your methylation cycle, which is the cycle that creates glutathione, then your body has a harder time producing it. And I always tell patients, I'm like, if we could go in a time machine, I feel like I should have a time machine here, because I would like to, almost like a kid's show. You go in the time machine, we go back 300, 500 years ago, we see the way they lived. We're like, look, they're growing land they're growing food on their own land, and they're eating it, and they're not exposed to chemicals or pesticides. They're not doing biotechnology. They're not using GMO seeds, et cetera, et cetera. They're not using modern medicine. They're using what God gave us to heal. And so I always say, when we go back, if we could go back, I believe we could go back. I mean, Nikola Tesla's creations, he probably did create a time machine. Probably
sure,
somebody,
yeah.
probably someone out there has data to this. But if we could go back, we would take evaluation of the toxic exposure, and we would very quickly notice that there isn't really a lot of toxins. And what glutathione does, it helps to detoxify toxins in the body. So many, many years ago, we didn't have all these toxic exposure. Now, just like you mentioned with the other doctor that you spoke to, that yes, this is the most toxic humanity has ever been, and we're just perpetuating that by our so-called advancements in our society. So now we are being bombarded by toxins, heavy metals, chemicals, pollutants, plastics. And so even if we are producing enough glutathione in the body, it's not enough. So that's why I always have this conversation with patients. I'm like, we always want to improve glutathione in the body. And I love administering glutathione IVs, because you absorb 100% of that glutathione, and you don't really absorb glutathione very well orally. So it's a really nice therapy to provide patients with. And in a perfect world, right, like you'd be getting a glutathione IV every single week as prevention, right?
I was going to ask you about that, because I got me so curious. It's like, man, I want to come down to the clinic there and get hooked up, and just, I got a lot of stuff going on here myself. But yeah, I was just always wondering about that, how, as far as preventative medicine, stuff like that. And I'm always 100% about, preventative stuff like that. And it almost seems like it would be so nice if that was available a lot more available, had a greater availability to the general public, that they can come down and just get hooked up all the time and prevent that. That would be so amazing. It'd be just like, okay, I'm just gonna, instead of going to the pharmacy, whatever, or maybe you go to get the pharmacy and and they hook you up, and there you go. You sit for, what is it, about an hour and a half?
Yeah. And
hour and a half.
approximately an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, we should actually, instead of having like all these tanning beds, we should have like glutathione beds.
Yes.
And just a clinic where people can walk in clinics, lie down, get hooked up, throw some music on. They can listen to my podcast if they want.
Yes.
I think that's a great business model. I think we should, I think with your knowledge and your backing, we should have like Lococo clinics everywhere, walking clinics.
I always tell people, I go in a perfect world, our healthcare system, like you would go to the emergency room, and if the conventional medical doctors decide, okay, they don't think it's a tumor, I always laugh because it goes back to that movie. I can't remember the name of the movie, but with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the little kid.
It's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor. If you don't have internal bleeding, if you don't have a broken bone, you don't require stitches, right? If they rule out these really serious things that need to be treated immediately, and they're like, yep, it's not that, which most of the time, like if you had to look at the stats of an ER room, how many people get sent home? They're like, you're fine, right? Like most people get sent home. Okay. So
unless they misdiagnose you,
which happens more often than not as well.
Oh yeah. That's a story. That's a whole story we can go into with myself. Yeah.
So in a perfect world, we would have like, you would go to the ER. If they rule out any major things that they need to admit you for ICU care, then you would go next door, and next door would be emergency medicine for alternative care, right? And you would have everything under the sun, from like Reiki to homeopathy to osteopathy to naturopathy to TCM. Like you would just have everything. And then like we wouldn't have sick culture, right? If people had both options. But again, that's not the way our healthcare system works. And I always tell people it's because, there's not that much money to go around. that's what I say to patients. Do I really believe that? No, but that's what I say just to make them feel better, because I think that the real problem is that we have to understand, back to educating yourself and realizing what really happens is that big pharma pays lobbyists to go to the government and to dictate how things are going to go and where the funding is going to go. So again, like, it's, people always get mad and they always say to me all the time, Michael, they're always like, I don't understand, like, why didn't my doctor know there was something wrong with me? Like, you're telling me there's something wrong. They said that there was nothing wrong. I'm like, well, if they can't prescribe a pharmaceutical drug and if they can't recommend you to go get surgery, what more do you want them to do for you? Like, in all fairness, like, that's all they've been trained to do. They can't do anything more for you. They can't prevent things. They can't put your body back into balance. That's not what they're there to do. That's not what they've been trained to do. So again, back to the onus being on the public, I had to learn that the hard way. And for most people, I think you do learn that the hard way. You go through the ringer with conventional medicine. And once you come out of that experience and you're like, shit, that didn't teach me anything and that didn't help me with anything. And maybe for me, I was worse off. And I was like, I wish I didn't choose that route, but I didn't know any better at the time. So then I had to learn. So I know it's like most people learn because they've already have gone through something really, really tough or difficult.
Yeah, disease is a great teacher. You know, when you have disease and you have a real severe one, it really makes you reevaluate things. It makes you, become more educated. I know I did some work with a cancer support center, and it's amazing, listening to the patients over the years. And it's amazing how, some people go into the rut where they get into their victim. And it's like, okay. And then there's other people who just take like this. It's like, okay, all right, motherfucker, we're going to go off this. We're going to go at this. We're going to take this and we're going to run with it. And they become so knowledgeable and they take really responsibility. And those are the ones who have the higher survivability rate, is because of their mental attitude towards it. And they just don't let themselves get beat by it. And it's amazing how just the learning, they take that everything, their whole life is now, because once you get that diagnosis, and a lot of people, it's a very scary diagnosis. Nobody wants to have that, their doctor say, oh, by the way, we got your test back and you got cancer. Like, for most people, it's like the whole shock thing. The brain goes one way or they go the other way. And it's amazing when you go through in a really kind of hellish experience. It is a learning experience, because you learn so much about the industry. I know I had a friend of mine, was an old acquaintance of mine. He had a liver transplant. And again, a lot of the stuff that, accelerated his liver disease was actually the medication that his regular GP gave to him years ago. So I just compounded his disease. And he talked to me about the whole experience behind that. And I was just like, really? He says, Mike, you can't believe how corrupt the system was. And I'm just like, wow, really? And, eventually he got his liver, and thank God, and he's healthy and he's living his life. But it's really interesting, I really think that we really got to pay attention to it, to what's going on.
Yeah, and I want to share like a quick story. So one of my cancer patients, and like, just like you said, like, we're always learning in life. Life is like a journey. We're always learning. It's our choice. We get to learn or we get to ignore it, right? And the beauty of me being able to do what I do is that people are putting trust and faith in me. And one patient scared the living crap out of me because this is many, many years ago. And she came to me and her cancer was left untreated. It was very advanced and she wanted nothing to do with conventional medicine. And she left it for a long time before she came to see me. And when she was in my office, when she was in my office, she was like, okay, can I show you? And it was a breast cancer. And so I can't even find an image to show anybody like what I saw, because it was just left untreated for so long. It was very visible and it was very, very aggressive. And so, I was really, really in shock. And I was like, I really kind of think you need to go to like an ER, like, this is really, really bad. Like, this doesn't look good. And, the nipple had fallen off and there was this gaping hole in the breast and you could see all the way up to the shoulder, and it was necrosing and it was dying tissue and it smelled. And I can't find an image on Google or DuckDuckGo.
That's okay. I don't think I really want to see that.
To share with people, right? Well, for my colleagues, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was really, really nervous, because most cancers you don't visibly see. And the other thing is most patients are, they go into the conventional healthcare system pretty quickly. So I was really strongly advocating for getting an oncologist on board as well, because I didn't feel confident to be the only practitioner that was treating her at the time. And she had to sit me down because I was very apprehensive and I was very nervous. And because I don't want to cause harm, and I don't want to be ignorant to the fact that I can only do so much, right? So I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm not doing everything I can do for my patient. So she had to sit me down and give me a lecture. This is why I learned so much from all my patients. But this lady, she taught me the most so far. She sat me down and gave me a lecture, and she goes, look, she goes, it's my choice. She goes, I get to go to the oncologist, hear what they have to say, and decide if I want to do it or not. And then I get to come to you and I get to hear what you have to say, and then I can decide if I want to do it or not. And she's like, this is what I want. She's like, it's not what you want, it's what I want. And I was like, okay. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was always thinking, Michael was like, oh my gosh, if this lady dies in my office, I'm never going to recover, ever.
Yeah,
and
that would be tough.
So, right? So anyways, she did everything that I recommended, to the T and more, right? She was committed, and she was hardcore. She never cried. She was never woe is me. The victimhood game, she did not play. She was like, this is what I have, look at it. This is what I want to do. This is what we're doing. You need to man up. Basically it's what she was telling me. This is what's happening. And I was like, okay. And so she lived far longer than expected. And again, the one thing is, because you brought up the money thing and that people not wanting to spend money on things. And the more I learn, and again, I feel like I opened up this podcast and it sounds like I'm being mean and I'm being tough, but it's just the more I learn, the more I realize, okay, I love designer stuff. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I am very much you like
the she.
Yeah, a girl who likes the finer things in life. I don't want to confuse anyone. I am not your typical granola naturopath. I'm not. I like the finer things in life. But the more I learn, the more I'm I want to put my money towards my food. I want to put my money towards. The more I learn, I value that more than I value the material things, because I know what the impact is going to be, and especially as I get older. So, what is my point? I don't even know why I went into that tangent, but the point is that with this cancer patient, she with perseverance, strength, determination, and she never let money become an issue. That's what I wanted to point at. She never let money become an issue, because I saw her daughter many years later, and her daughter came in, and her main concern was stress and anxiety. And I was like, okay, what's going on? What are you stressed about? And she was like, we had to put take out a second mortgage on the house to pay for all my mom's medical care, right? And she was like, that was her daughter's major stress, is putting money back into that. And what I thought was so interesting is that this patient, because this patient did not have the financial whereabouts, let me explain to you, she did not come from wealth, but this was her priority. She was like, I want to get better. I want to extend my life. I don't want to have the negative side effects of chemotherapy and radiation. This is what I want to do. And she did get that, but at the cost of, obviously, she put a second mortgage on her house, but she never told that to me. And the interesting point is that when cancer patients come here, they're here up to 3 times a week, right? So I have a lot of interaction with them. And it's the thing that amazes me is that, and I don't want to make it about a financial thing, but I want to point out is that she made a decision, she made a choice, and she stuck to it, and nothing could sway her. And it was this is what's happening, this is how it's going to go. And just imagine if in life we never let fear interfere with what we wanted to accomplish, because money is just fear-based mentality. We're I don't have enough money to go on the trip I want to go on. I don't have enough money to educate myself, and I don't have enough money to buy that healthy food. This is coming from a fear-based place, because I can share my personal story is that I've spent over 25 grand fixing my neck. I had a really bad neck injury this year, long story. But if you asked me before my neck injury, if I was going to spend $25,000 on my neck, I'd be like, F no, like this is not happening. I want to buy a house one day. I would want to reinvest in my business. Like that's a lot of money. But in the moment, all of a sudden, the only thing that matters is me taking care of my neck. Cause I'm like, I can't do anything else until I take care of my neck. And I think about one of my other patients, and she's a seamstress, and I've been yelling at her for like over 6 years, 7 years now. I'm like, you need to put your health first. And she's like, I got to pay the bills. Customers want me to do this work for them. I got to do it. Blah, blah, blah. And I recently just saw her because I haven't seen her since the last March. And she was like, I'm so embarrassed to come in and talk to you. And I was like, why? She's like, I had to shut my business down. I'm like, and I was livid because I was like, she has at least another 30 years of life on her, but because she didn't put, maybe 20 years, okay, maybe I'm over exaggerating, but if she put her health first, because I would always tell her, I'm like, you can work until the day you die doing your work. Like maybe your workload would lessen, but you could always have that stream of income coming in. And plus she also loved what she did. It brought her joy to interact with her customers, make her customers happy. So it was a passion for her. It's also a way for her to make money. And if she made her health a priority, she could work until the day she dies. And so I think about this again, like I said, I learn from my patients. So when I think about my own health, if I ever start going down that pathway of being like, oh my gosh, Jen, you're spending way too much money on your health, I'm like, but again, I can work till the day I die. And if I'm not well, I can't work.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I could show you my statements from my chiropractor because I had like back issues. And when you have like neck, any injuries like that, and I'm definitely not a rich guy. I mean, I'm mostly a freelancer, right? So it wasn't like a steady income coming on, and so that I understand that fear mentality, but I also understand when you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Like really, that's the most important. I can't work. I mean, I can't get up and work and try to make money because I can't stand up because my back was so bad. I could barely make it into the chiropractors, and when you find something like that and you spend that money on it and you provide that, I mean, it really kind of gives you that, you reevaluate a lot of stuff. It's not so important, but it's really interesting that, we still have that mentality that, our health is really not, it's only when we miss it, then we start to realize that, oh my God, maybe I should do something. Only when disease sets in or when you can't do as much as you can. And that's always something that I'm so much aware of is when when something goes wrong, I go, okay, what was I doing? Okay, I gotta go back and readjust things. I'm not sleeping properly? Okay, am I eating properly? Am I drinking too much alcohol? Am I having a little too much sugar or caffeine? You kind of go down the list and you kind of look through it and go, okay, that's why I'm feeling like shit. Okay, let's reevaluate. And then if I'm, something's out of whack, and you actually get to know your body. Like when your body starts to get out of whack, it's like, oh, I need to go see my guy. I gotta go see my chiropractor. I gotta go see my acupuncturist, which I'm actually gonna go see my acupuncturist tomorrow because I need to get a little jabbed in, get some herbs going into me myself. So and then one of the things too is like, for a lot of people who I just always touch on this because, as far as financially, spending money on that, there are a lot of great ways to find alternative healing modalities. They're not really expensive. I know why at the beginning, how I met actually Lana Marconi was a little story. I actually went to the acupuncture school to get treatments there because instead of, spending $90 on a treatment, there were like $15 for a treatment, and you're getting all the right skills and things like that. There's a lot of massage schools, things like that. So there's always ways to, find out. And if you got some skills too, I know a lot of people now are kind of going old school where they're doing trade for services, which is another thing too, as well, which is always nice. So don't always think that, I can't afford it, because you can afford it. There's always ways. And that's my little preaching right there.
Yeah, I love that. I tell people too, I think about it like, going to university, right? People don't question the money that they spend going to university because they're like, I have to have this. Like, I have to have my education. How else am I going to have a job or a career? But no one looks at their health like that.
Yeah, that's so true. How do we get that way? Like, what it is? It's just because
Canadian free healthcare. That's the problem. That's the problem. Because Americans are not they don't think as much like this. Like Americans, if you had to pay for your health your hospital bill, over $250,000. And I know like a lot of Canadians are snowbirds, right? So they'll go to Florida for the winter. And sometimes I've had some family members where like they didn't get stuff covered under their insurance, and like they've been paying their bills back because it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's like, if you knew that you not exercising, you not taking care of your health, you eating fast food all day was going to lead to a heart attack that would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're gonna think twice before you participate or engage in the activities that would cause you to end up in that place. Sometimes, not everybody does, but
yeah. I mean, just seeing those hospital bills, that would cause me a heart attack. Just seeing those. I mean, we are I'm very grateful. I mean, I knocked the system a bit, but I'm just, because I'm very passionate about health, and I'm very, I want people to be educated. But I feel very privileged being Canadian, just for just sort of what we have too as well, because, I've been sick. I mean, if I looked at the hospital bills, if every time I walked in an emergency minute, I think I would be, yeah, I didn't know where I'd be honest with you. So, I mean, there is some good and bad and stuff like that, but I really appreciate you being on the show today. Like, I really love your passion. You always come across very passionate, very knowledgeable, which hopefully the listeners will understand too as well, because this is something important, everybody. Like, we got to start taking care of our health. We really got to pay attention to things. We got to educate ourselves. Dr. Jennifer's got a lot of information. I hope you reach out to her. And that being said, Dr. Jennifer, where can people find you? If people are looking for to have you on board as part of their overall health package and stuff like that, they want to, educate themselves, come in for treatments, things like that, where can they find you?
so you can check us out on our Instagram page, Lococo Wellness Clinic. We have lots of videos there that we share a lot of information, so you can get kind of like an idea of what we do, how things work. And you can go to our website, lococowellnessclinic.ca. And yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I think this whole IV therapy has really got me thinking. I think I might have to just drive down the road there and get hooked up.
Come on down.
I was always planning on it in some ways. But yeah, I definitely wanted to like get down there and just get a little IV therapy and enjoy that too as well. And plus, one of the reasons I love like experimenting too as well, because then I have something to speak about, because it's like how do you know something unless you've experienced it yourself? So it's like acupuncture. It's like, I know all about it because I experienced it, but now getting hooked up, and then it's like, okay, I've just taken 10 years off my life just from getting hooked up. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. It definitely doesn't feel like a podcast. I feel like I'm just having a conversation. So hopefully I didn't get in too much trouble today.
No. And again, this is again, a learning process of myself, because that's what I wanted to have, is more of a conversation. Is two passionate people having conversation, and everybody can be voyeurs and just listen into two people, who are highly passionate about, health and wellness and inspiring people. And that's what it's really all about at the end of the day, is if we can help people out, even if it's just one individual that reaches out to you and you help them on their journey, it's well worth the time. So again, I appreciate that. And that being said, Dr. Jennifer, again, thank you so much. I'm going to just close off the podcast here. This has been the Metaphysical Mentor podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.